The cantina on Nexus Station was dark and quiet. Commander Zekthara sat alone at a corner table, his forearms wrapped around a glass of bitter ale. His gray skin showed many scars from old battles. His compound eyes looked tired and sad. A young coalition officer walked over to his table. The officer was nervous but excited. Everyone knew about Commander Zekthara. He was a legend who had fought in the Great War against the Kethvar Empire. "Commander, sir," the young officer said. "May I sit with you?" Zekthara looked up slowly. He did not speak for a long moment. Then he nodded toward an empty chair. The officer sat down carefully. "Sir, I have heard stories about the war, about how you fought with humans. Is it true what they say?" Zekthara's eyes grew darker. He took a long drink from his glass. "What do they say, young one? They say humans are the fiercest fighters in the galaxy. They say they never give up even when death is certain." The old commander was quiet for a long time. Outside the cantina, ships moved through space like tiny lights. Finally, he began to speak. "Before the war, no one cared about humans," Zekthara said. "They were a young species. Weak bodies, short lives. Their technology was basic compared to ours. The Galactic Coalition only accepted them because we needed numbers." The young officer leaned forward, listening carefully. "When the Kethvar Empire attacked our outer colonies, the Coalition sent mixed forces to defend them. My people, the Velkari, were the strongest. We had thick armor skin and powerful weapons. The Thorax had energy shields. The Zentari could move faster than sound." Zekthara paused and looked at his glass. "And then there were the humans. Small, soft, fragile things. We thought they would run at the first sign of danger." The commander's voice grew quiet. "I was wrong about many things in those days. But I was most wrong about humans," he continued his story. "My first mission with humans was on a planet called Kepler 442b. It was supposed to be simple. Scout the enemy positions and report back. I commanded a mixed unit of 30 soldiers from different species. The human squad was led by Captain Jake Morrison. He was not impressive to look at. Average height for a human. Brown hair. Quiet voice. He did not boast like the Velkari warriors or show off like the Zentari scouts." Zekthara remembered the first time he met Morrison. The human captain had studied the mission files for hours while other soldiers relaxed. He asked many questions about the terrain and enemy movements. "I thought he was nervous," Zekthara said. "Later I learned he was preparing. The mission started well. The mixed unit landed on Kepler 442b without problems. The planet was mostly desert with deep canyons cutting through red rock. Their target was a Kethvar communications base hidden in one of these canyons. We moved through the desert at night," Zekthara said. "The Zentari scouts found a path down into the canyon. Everything seemed normal, but it was not normal. The Kethvar had been waiting. The attack came at dawn," the commander said. "Plasma fire from 3 directions. The canyon became a trap. We were caught in the open with nowhere to hide. The coalition forces tried to fight back, but they were surrounded. The Velkari warriors used their strength to move rocks for cover. The Thorax activated their energy shields. But the enemy fire was too heavy. I thought we would all die there," Zekthara said. "The Kethvar had more soldiers in better positions. Any sane commander would have ordered a retreat, but Captain Morrison did not retreat. Instead, he gathered his human soldiers around him. There were only 20 humans in the group, but they looked calm despite the deadly situation." Zekthara watched as Morrison studied the canyon walls with intense focus. The human captain was looking for something that the alien soldiers could not see. Morrison called his soldiers by name. Zekthara said, "Sergeant Lisa Hayes, Corporal Tony Martinez, Private Kevin Brooks, and others." He spoke to each one quietly, then they began to move. The humans spread out across the canyon in a pattern that seemed random to Zekthara, but slowly he began to understand what Morrison was doing. The humans were not fighting to win, Zekthara said. They were fighting to hold. Morrison had seen something in the canyon walls that could save us all, but it would take time. The human soldiers used their basic weapons in ways that surprised everyone. They made explosives from equipment packs and placed them at key points in the canyon. They turned broken rocks into barriers and used damaged vehicles as shields. Private Brooks was just a young human, Zekthara said, maybe 20 years old. He had been hit by plasma fire and was bleeding badly. But when Morrison pointed to an enemy position, Brooks picked up a pack of explosives and started running. The young officer listening to the story felt his breath catch. "What happened?" Brooks ran straight at a Kethvar heavy walker, Zekthara said. A machine twice the size of any soldier, armed with cannons that could destroy buildings. The enemy shot at him, but he kept running. Zekthara's voice became very quiet. Just before Brooks reached the walker, he turned back and smiled at Captain Morrison. Then he triggered the explosives. The explosion destroyed the enemy machine and opened a hole in their line. It gave the coalition forces the chance they needed to regroup. But the battle was far from over, Zekthara said. The Kethvar had more soldiers coming. We were still trapped, and now we had lost one of our best fighters. Captain Morrison gathered his remaining soldiers again. They were tired and wounded, but their eyes still burned with determination. The human captain looked at the canyon walls one more time, then nodded. Morrison told us to hold our positions for 18 hours, Zekthara said. 18 hours seemed impossible. We had ammunition for maybe 6 hours of fighting, food and water for less. But the humans had a plan. They had been studying the canyon since they arrived. Morrison knew that coalition reinforcements were coming, but they needed time to reach the planet. For 18 hours, those humans fought like demons, Zekthara said. They used every trick, every bit of cover, every damaged weapon. When their ammunition ran low, they threw rocks. When their weapons broke, they used their hands. The young officer stared at the old commander. Did they hold? Zekthara nodded slowly. When the rescue ships arrived, only 7 humans were still alive. Captain Morrison was unconscious from blood loss. But they had held the line. The commander finished his drink and stood up. That was my first lesson about humans, young one. They do not fight to win. They fight to protect. And there is no force in the galaxy stronger than a human protecting something they care about. As Zekthara walked away, the young officer sat alone, thinking about courage and sacrifice in ways he had never considered before. 3 months after the canyon battle, Commander Zekthara found himself on a human ship. The vessel was called UCS Defiance, and it was nothing like the powerful warships of other coalition species. The Defiance had once been a cargo hauler. Humans had taken the old ship and added weapons, armor, and military equipment wherever they could fit them. The result looked ugly and patched together, but it flew and it fought. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the ship. She was a short woman with dark hair and quick eyes. Before the war, she had been a merchant captain, moving trade goods between human colonies. When the Kethvar attacked, she volunteered to fight. We are not real military, Rodriguez told Zekthara when he came aboard. Most of my crew are civilians. Shopkeepers, farmers, factory workers, but we know how to fly and we know how to fight. Zekthara looked around the ship's bridge. The crew was indeed a mix of people. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh had worked in a mining station. Communications Officer Amy Chen had been a teacher. Weapons Officer Bill Carter had fixed cars in a small town. Why do you fight? Zekthara asked Rodriguez. Your people could stay safe on Earth. Rodriguez smiled, but her eyes were serious. Because if we do not fight here, we will have to fight at home. Better to stop the enemy far from our families. Their mission was to evacuate a research station before Kethvar forces could capture it. The station held important information about coalition technology. If the enemy got this data, they could build better weapons. The flight to the research station took 2 days. Zekthara watched the human crew work together with smooth efficiency. They joked and laughed during quiet moments, but when duty called, they moved like parts of a well-built machine. How do you train civilians to work like this? Zekthara asked Rodriguez. We do not train them, she replied. We trust them. Humans work best when they know their friends depend on them. When they reached the research station, they found trouble waiting. The station was dark and silent. No response to radio calls. No signs of life. It is a trap, Rodriguez said quietly. The Kethvar got here first. She was right. As the Defiance approached the station, enemy ships appeared from hiding spots behind asteroids. 6 Kethvar warships surrounded the human vessel. Each enemy ship was bigger and more powerful than the Defiance. Coalition vessel, you will surrender immediately, came a message from the Kethvar commander. Prepare to be boarded. Rodriguez looked at her crew. They looked back at her with calm faces. No fear, no panic. Just waiting for orders. Options? Rodriguez asked. We could fight, said Weapons Officer Carter. But 6 against 1 are bad odds. We could run, said Engineer. But they are faster than us, and we could surrender, said Communications Officer Chen. But they will execute us anyway. Rodriguez nodded. Then we try option 4. She turned to the ship's intercom. All hands, this is the captain. We are going dark. Full shutdown in 30 seconds. Emergency protocols in effect. Zekthara watched in confusion as the crew began shutting down all ship systems. Lights went out. Engines stopped. Life support switched to minimal power. The Defiance went completely silent and dark. What are you doing? Zekthara whispered. Playing dead, Rodriguez whispered back. The Kethavar sensors look for heat, energy, and movement. If we give them nothing to see, maybe they will think we are just another piece of space junk. The plan was insane. Without full life support, the crew would slowly run out of air. Without heat, they would freeze. Without engines, they could not control where the ship drifted. But Rodriguez had studied the system carefully. She knew about the asteroid field nearby. She knew about the wreckage from old battles floating in space. Most importantly, she knew about orbital mechanics and gravity. For 6 days, the Defiance drifted silently through space. The Kethavar ships searched everywhere, scanning every piece of debris, but they could not find the human vessel. Inside the ship, conditions became terrible. The air grew thin and stale. The temperature dropped until crew members could see their breath. Several people got sick from the cold and stress, but the humans never complained. They took turns sleeping to save oxygen. They shared body heat to stay warm. They whispered jokes to keep spirits up. How long can we survive like this? Zekthara asked Engineer Walsh. Maybe 8 days, Walsh replied quietly. Maybe 10 if we are lucky. And how long will we hide? Walsh smiled. As long as the captain says we hide. On the 7th day, Rodriguez called the senior crew to the bridge. They moved carefully in the darkness, guided only by small emergency lights. It is time, Rodriguez said. She pointed to a display showing the positions of the enemy ships. They have spread out to search a wider area. The command ship is alone. She had been calculating trajectories for days, waiting for the perfect moment. The Defiance had drifted close to the Kethavar command ship, while appearing to be just another piece of floating debris. We get one chance, Rodriguez said. Full power, all weapons straight at their command bridge. If we miss, we die. If we hesitate, we die. The crew nodded. They had been waiting for this moment. Engineering. Stand by for emergency power, Rodriguez ordered. Weapons. Target their command section. Communications. Send a message to coalition forces when we light up. She looked around at her crew one last time. These people had trusted her with their lives for 7 days of silent hell. Now she was asking them to trust her with one final gamble. All stations ready, Captain, came the quiet reports. Rodriguez nodded. Bring us to life. The Defiance exploded into action. Lights blazed, engines roared, weapons charged. The ship burst out of its hiding place like a predator striking from the shadows. The Kethavar command ship was caught completely by surprise. Their sensors had been looking for ships trying to run away or hide. They never expected an attack from something they thought was space junk. The Defiance fired everything it had at the enemy command bridge. Missiles, plasma cannons, and railguns all struck within seconds. The Kethavar ship shuddered and began to list to one side. Target damaged, reported Carter. Their command center is gone. But the other enemy ships were responding now. They turned toward the Defiance, weapons charging. Coalition reinforcements incoming, Chen reported. Admiral Park's task force will be here in 20 minutes. Rodriguez smiled. Then we just need to survive 20 minutes. The battle that followed was fierce but short. The Kethavar ships, confused by the sudden loss of their command vessel, could not coordinate their attacks. The Defiance used hit-and-run tactics, striking fast and then disappearing behind asteroids. When coalition reinforcements arrived, they found the Defiance still fighting, still flying, still refusing to give up. Later, Admiral Park asked Rodriguez how she had known the plan would work. I did not know, she replied honestly, but sometimes not knowing is better than being certain you will fail. Zekthara learned something new about humans that day. They were not just brave fighters or clever tacticians. They were patient hunters who could wait in the darkness for days, enduring any hardship for the chance to strike at the perfect moment. How did you trust your crew to stay quiet for so long? He asked Rodriguez. She looked surprised by the question. Trust them? Commander, they chose to be here. They chose to fight. When humans choose something, they do not give up easily. As the Defiance limped back to base for repairs, Zekthara realized that human ships were dangerous, not because of their weapons or armor. They were dangerous because of the people inside them. The Battle of Proxima Station was supposed to be the end of everything. Commander Zekthara knew this as he watched the massive Kethvar fleet approach through space. Their ships moved like a dark cloud, blocking out the stars. Proxima Station was the most important coalition base in the Outer Rim. It was a huge structure built around an old asteroid, with docks for thousands of ships and storage for supplies that fed 50 worlds. If Proxima fell, the war was over. The Kethvar brought their newest weapon to destroy the station. They called it a quantum destabilizer. The weapon could break apart the tiny pieces that held matter together. It could turn solid metal into dust in seconds. General Patricia Stone commanded the defense of Proxima Station. She was not what anyone expected in a military leader. Stone was a big woman with rough hands and a voice that sounded like she had worked in loud places all her life. Before the war, Stone had built things. She was a construction worker who understood how buildings and bridges stayed strong. When humans needed generals, they chose people who knew how to solve problems, not just how to fight. "We cannot stop that weapon," Admiral Chen told the War Council. Chen was one of the few remaining senior officers. "Our shields will not hold. Our armor will not protect us. We should evacuate everyone and retreat." Stone studied the technical reports about the quantum destabilizer. She read them slowly, like someone trying to understand a difficult machine. Finally, she looked up at the other officers. "What if we do not try to stop it?" she asked. The room became quiet. Everyone stared at her. "General, I do not understand," Admiral Chen said. Stone pointed to the station's blueprints. Proxima Station is built around a solid nickel-iron asteroid. The asteroid weighs about 50 billion tons. What happens if we turn that mass into a weapon? Zekthara felt his blood turn cold. "You want to destroy the station?" "I want to destroy their fleet," Stone replied calmly. "The quantum destabilizer will break apart the asteroid's structure. If we place explosive charges in the right spots, we can control how it breaks apart, turn Proxima into the biggest bomb in galactic history." The plan was insane. Stone wanted to rig the entire station with explosives, wait for the Kethvar fleet to get close, then blow up everything at once. The explosion would destroy the enemy fleet, but everyone on the station would die too. "How many people are on Proxima right now?" asked Colonel Murphy, the human marine commander. "About 40,000, Admiral Chen replied. "Military and civilian personnel." "And how many people will die if the Kethvar win this war?" Stone asked. No one answered because everyone knew. Billions would die. The Kethvar did not take prisoners or spare civilians. "I need volunteers," Stone said. "A small team to stay behind and trigger the charges. Everyone else evacuates." Every human officer in the room raised their hand. Stone smiled sadly. "I only need 12 people. The rest of you have other jobs to do." She chose her team carefully. Demolitions expert Carl Patterson, who had worked in mines before the war. Systems analyst Ruth Kim, who had designed computer networks for cities. Engineer Ben Torres, who had built power plants. All of them knew they were volunteering to die. For 3 days, Stone's team worked throughout the station. They placed charges in support structures, power conduits, and storage areas. They calculated blast patterns and timing sequences. They turned Proxima Station into a carefully designed trap. Zekthara helped with the evacuation. He watched thousands of people leave their homes and workplaces, carrying only what they could grab quickly. But he also watched human families say goodbye to sons and daughters who were staying behind. "Why do they volunteer?" he asked Stone during a break in the work. Stone was covered in dirt and sweat from crawling through maintenance tunnels. "Because someone has to," she said simply. "Because if we do not do this, the war ends badly for everyone we care about." "But there must be another way," Zekthara insisted. Stone looked at him with tired eyes. "Commander, I have been building things my whole life. I know how structures work, how they hold together, how they come apart. Sometimes the only way to save the foundation is to sacrifice the building." On the final day, the Kethvar fleet arrived. Their ships filled the space around Proxima Station like hungry predators. The quantum destabilizer was mounted on their largest ship, a massive dreadnought that could destroy entire planets. Stone's team had prepared a fake defense. They left behind a skeleton crew of volunteers to make it look like the station was still fully manned. Robot fighters launched from the docks to attack the enemy ships. Automated weapons fired from the station's gun turrets. The Kethvar commander was suspicious at first. The defense seemed too weak, too disorganized. But his sensors showed life signs throughout the station. His scouts reported seeing coalition soldiers at their posts. What the enemy did not know was that most of the life signs came from domestic animals that humans had released throughout the station. The soldiers his scouts saw were holographic projections created by Ruth Kim's computer systems. "They are taking the bait," Kim reported from the command center. "The dreadnought is moving into position to use the quantum destabilizer." Stone watched the enemy ship approach through the station's cameras. The huge vessel moved slowly but steadily toward Proxima, its terrible weapon charging with deadly energy. "How long until the weapon is ready?" she asked. 6 hours, replied Carl Patterson. "The destabilizer needs time to lock onto the asteroid's molecular structure." Stone nodded. "That gives us time to make sure everyone is clear." She sent final evacuation orders to the last transport ships. Every few minutes, she checked with her team to make sure they were all still at their posts. "Ben, how are the power systems?" "All charges connected and ready, General." "Ruth, are the computers working?" "All timing sequences programmed and tested." "Carl, are the explosives stable?" "Everything is green. We are ready when you are." Stone looked around the command center one last time. These 12 people had volunteered to die so that billions of others could live. They sat at their stations calmly like workers finishing an ordinary job. "General," came a voice on the radio. "This is Admiral Chen. All evacuation ships are clear. You can trigger the charges whenever you are ready." Stone picked up the communications microphone. She thought about her words carefully, knowing they would be her last. "This is General Stone to all coalition forces. We are about to show the Kethvar what happens when you threaten our homes and families. Remember us and remember why we fought." She looked at her team. "Any last words?" Ruth Kim smiled. "Tell my kids I was thinking about them." Carl Patterson chuckled. "Tell everyone this was the biggest demolition job in history." Ben Torres just nodded. "It has been an honor, General." Stone reached for the detonation switch. Through the cameras, she could see the Kethvar dreadnought moving into final position. The quantum destabilizer was almost ready to fire. "For everyone who will never come home," she said quietly. "For everyone who will never see another sunrise." She pressed the switch. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. Proxima Station, its asteroid foundation, and the entire Kethvar fleet disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire that burned like a new star for several minutes. When the light faded, there was nothing left but empty space and debris. The Battle of Proxima Station ended the war. Without their main fleet and their quantum destabilizer, the Kethvar Empire could not continue fighting. Within weeks, they asked for peace terms, but Zekthara would never forget the price of victory. 12 humans had chosen to die so that the galaxy could live in peace. They had calculated the cost and paid it without hesitation. Years later, when people asked him about the war, Zekthara always told them about General Stone and her team. He told them that humans did not win because they were the strongest or the smartest. They won because they understood that some things were worth dying for. After the destruction of Proxima Station, the war should have been over. The Kethvar Empire had lost their main fleet and their most powerful weapon. But they still controlled dozens of worlds and had millions of soldiers spread across the galaxy. Commander Zekthara found himself assigned to a joint task force led by Colonel Frank Martinez, a human who had risen from the ranks of common soldiers. Martinez was a quiet man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of fighting. "The Kethvar are trapped," Martinez explained to his mixed unit of human and alien soldiers. "They cannot win the war, but they can make surrender very expensive for us. Our job is to convince them that fighting is pointless." The task force was small but elite. 50 human marines, 20 Velkari warriors, 15 Zentari scouts, and a handful of specialists from other species. Their mission was to capture key Kethvar commanders and force a surrender. Their first target was General Vextar, the Kethvar officer who commanded the fortress world of Kepler 438c. Vextar was known for his cruelty and his refusal to accept defeat. Taking him alive would send a message to other Kethvar commanders. The fortress world was a nightmare of metal and concrete. The Kethvar had turned the entire planet into a military base with underground bunkers, automated defenses, and millions of loyal soldiers. It was considered impossible to assault. "We are not going to assault it," Martinez told his officers. "We are going to walk in the front door." The colonel's plan was simple but dangerous. A small team would infiltrate the fortress dressed as Kethvar soldiers. They would capture General Vextar during a military ceremony and escape before anyone realized what had happened. The Kethvar have a tradition, Martinez explained. Every month, Vextar inspects his troops in the main courtyard. He brings only a small guard because he feels safe in his own fortress. Zekthara studied the plan carefully. This is very risky. If we are discovered, we will be trapped inside their strongest base with no way to escape. Martinez nodded. That is true. But if we succeed, we capture one of their most important leaders without firing a shot. Sometimes the biggest risks bring the biggest rewards. The infiltration team included Martinez, Zekthara, Sergeant Lisa Hayes, Corporal Tony Rodriguez, and Private Kevin Walsh. They spent weeks studying Kethvar military customs, learning their language, and practicing their movements. The key is confidence, Hayes told the group. Kethvar soldiers never question orders from superiors. If we act like we belong there, they will believe we belong there. The team used captured Kethvar uniforms and identification codes. Human technicians had modified the alien armor to fit different body shapes. The disguises were not perfect, but they would work in poor light or from a distance. Landing on Kepler 438c was the first challenge. The planet had sensor nets and patrol ships watching every approach route, but Martinez had studied the fortress schedules and found a weakness. Supply ships arrive every Tuesday at 800 hours, he explained. They land at the North Dock, unload cargo, and leave within 2 hours. We hide in one of those ships. The supply ship captain was a human smuggler named Jack Chen who worked for Coalition Intelligence. Chen had been running goods to Kethvar worlds for months, building trust and gathering information. I can get you inside, Chen told Martinez. But getting you out is your problem. If this goes wrong, I never saw you. The team hid in cargo containers filled with food supplies. The containers were uncomfortable and airless, but they provided perfect cover. Chen's ship passed through all security checks without problems. Inside the fortress, the team moved carefully through service corridors and maintenance tunnels. Private Walsh, who had worked as a janitor before the war, knew how to blend in with support staff. He led them through areas where ordinary workers were invisible to guards. Cleaning crews can go anywhere, Walsh whispered. Nobody pays attention to people emptying trash or mopping floors. They reached the main courtyard just as the monthly inspection ceremony was beginning. Thousands of Kethvar soldiers stood in perfect formations while their officers reviewed them. General Vexitar stood on a raised platform with his personal guard. There he is, Martinez said quietly, exactly where intelligence said he would be. The plan required perfect timing. During the ceremony, Vextar would inspect different units of his army. When he reached the artillery section, he would be briefly separated from most of his guards. Hayes and Rodriguez, you take the platform, Martinez ordered. Walsh, you control the exits. Zekthara and I will grab Vextar. The team split up and moved into position. They walked calmly through the crowd of soldiers, acting like they had every right to be there. The Kethvar paid no attention to what appeared to be their own security personnel. When Vextar reached the artillery section, Martinez gave the signal. The team moved with practiced precision. Hayes and Rodriguez stunned the guards on the platform with silent weapons. Walsh sealed the main exits and activated smoke charges to create confusion. Martinez and Zekthara grabbed General Vextar before he could call for help. What is the meaning of this? Vextar demanded in his own language. You are coming with us, Martinez replied in perfect Kethvar speech. Do not resist and you will not be harmed. The escape was the most dangerous part. Thousands of enemy soldiers surrounded them, but the smoke and confusion gave them precious minutes to reach their extraction point. Chen's ship was waiting in the service tunnels below the courtyard. The smuggler had positioned his vessel near a cargo loading dock where ships came and went regularly. Move, 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 Martinez shouted as they ran through the tunnels. Behind them, alarm sirens began to wail. The Kethvar had realized their general was missing and were starting to search the fortress. The team reached Chen's ship just as enemy patrols closed in on their position. The smuggler fired up his engines and lifted off immediately, not waiting for proper clearance from traffic control. This is Tower Control to Cargo Vessel 447, came an angry voice on the radio. You do not have clearance to depart. Return to dock immediately. Chen ignored the radio calls and flew straight up, pushing his ship to maximum speed. Behind them, fighter aircraft scrambled to pursue, but the cargo ship had a head start. Can we outrun them? Martinez asked. Not in a straight chase, Chen replied, but I know these systems better than they do. Hold on. The smuggler flew his ship through the asteroid belt that surrounded Kepler 438c. The big cargo vessel was not built for fancy flying, but Chen knew every rock and hiding spot in the belt. The pursuing fighters lost them in the maze of asteroids. Chen kept his ship hidden for 6 hours before making the jump to hyperspace in safety. General Vextar was the first high-ranking Kethvar officer captured alive during the war. His arrest sent shockwaves through the enemy empire. If their strongest fortress could be infiltrated and their best general captured, nowhere was safe. Within days, other Kethvar commanders began surrendering rather than risk similar fates. The psychological impact was enormous. The empire that had once seemed invincible was crumbling from within. How did you know the plan would work? Zekthara asked Martinez during the flight home. The colonel smiled. I did not know, but I knew my people. Hayes has nerves of steel under pressure. Rodriguez never misses his target. Walsh can blend in anywhere. You have experience with enemy tactics. But what if we had been caught? Martinez's expression became serious. Then we would have died. But sometimes you have to risk everything to save everything. Later, when Zekthara studied the mission reports, he realized that Martinez had planned for failure as well as success. There had been backup escape routes, emergency signals, and contingency plans for every possible disaster. Humans did not just take crazy risks, he learned. They calculated every angle, prepared for every possibility, and then acted with complete commitment when the moment came. The capture of General Vextar was the beginning of the end for the Kethvar Empire. Within 3 months, most of their remaining forces had surrendered. The war that had threatened to destroy the galaxy was finally over. But Zekthara would always remember the lesson of that mission. Victory did not always require massive armies or powerful weapons. Sometimes it just required a small group of people willing to walk into the enemy's strongest fortress and take what they needed. Humans had taught him that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the willingness to act despite fear, to risk everything for the chance to protect what mattered most. The war was over, but Commander Zekthara could not forget what he had seen. He sat in the same cantina on Nexus Station where his story had begun, staring at his drink and remembering faces of the dead. The young coalition officer who had asked about the war was still listening. His eyes were wide with amazement and horror at the stories he had heard. The humans won, the young officer said. Why do you look so sad? Zekthara was quiet for a long moment. Outside the cantina, ships moved peacefully through space. There were no more battles, no more emergency alerts, no more friends dying in distant systems. Yes, we won, Zekthara said finally, but victory came at a price that still haunts me. The old commander's voice was heavy with memory. Do you know how many humans died in the war? The young officer shook his head. 60% of their military-age population, Zekthara said. That means 6 out of every 10 young humans who could fight chose to fight. Most of them never came home. He thought about Captain Morrison, bleeding to death in a canyon while his soldiers held the line. Private Brooks smiling as he ran toward certain death with a pack of explosives. General Stone, pressing the detonation switch that would turn her into atoms of fire and light. Other species fought in the war too. Zekthara continued. The Velkari lost 10% of their warriors. The Zentari lost 15%. The Thorax lost 8%. These were terrible losses that we mourned deeply. But humans lost 60%, the young officer said quietly. And they never stopped volunteering, Zekthara replied. Even when the casualties became unbearable, even when entire families had lost their children, more humans kept joining the fight. The commander remembered visiting human colonies during the war. He had seen cities where most of the young people were gone, schools with empty classrooms, parents who would never see their children again. I asked a human mother once why she let her son join the military when she had already lost 2 other children, Zekthara said. Do you know what she told me? The young officer waited. She said, because if my son does not fight, someone else's son will have to fight twice as hard. Zekthara took a long drink and continued his story. After the surrender of the Kethvar Empire, the galaxy expected humans to demand revenge. The Kethvar had started the war, invaded peaceful worlds, and killed billions of innocent people. Any other species would have demanded blood, Zekthara said. The Velkari would have executed every Kethvar leader. The Zentari would have taken their worlds as punishment. Even my own people would have demanded harsh justice. But humans did something different. They offered mercy. President Sarah Williams, the human leader, announced that Earth would provide food, medicine, and rebuilding aid to former HFY worlds. Human engineers would help repair damaged cities. Human teachers would help educate HFY children. The galaxy was shocked, Zekthara said. Here was a species that had suffered the most, lost the most, sacrificed the most. And they wanted to help their enemies recover. The other coalition species did not understand. Many argued that humans were being foolish, that mercy was weakness, that the HFY would attack again if given the chance. But humans had a different way of thinking about victory. Captain Rodriguez explained it to me, Zekthara said. I asked her why humans wanted to help people who had tried to kill them. She said, we did not fight this war to destroy the HFY. We fought to stop the killing. If we keep killing after the war is over, then we never really stopped fighting. Zekthara had watched human relief ships arrive at devastated HFY worlds. The same people who had fought desperately against the Empire now worked desperately to rebuild it. Dr. Amanda Foster, who had lost her husband in the Battle of Proxima Station, led medical teams to treat wounded HFY soldiers. Engineer Mike Johnson, whose brother had died defending a human colony, designed new water treatment plants for HFY cities. I saw former enemies working together, Zekthara said. Humans and HFY building hospitals side by side. It was the strangest thing I had ever witnessed. The commander remembered visiting a HFY world called Terminus Prime 6 months after the war ended. The planet had been badly damaged during the fighting. Most of its cities were in ruins, but human construction teams were there working around the clock to repair the damage. They used their own technology and resources to help a people who had once tried to exterminate them. I met a HFY child in one of the refugee camps, Zekthara said. Her name was Sekla, and she was maybe 8 years old. She had lost her parents in the bombing of her city. The child was afraid of all aliens, especially Velkari like Zekthara. The war had taught her that different species were enemies to be feared, but she was not afraid of the human workers. Dr. Janet Price, a human medic, had been taking care of Sekla for weeks. The child followed the doctor everywhere, helping with small tasks and learning basic human words. I asked Dr. Price how she could care for an enemy child, Zekthara said. She looked at me like I had asked a foolish question. She said, this is not an enemy child. This is just a child. That moment changed how Zekthara understood humans. They did not see the galaxy in terms of us versus them. They saw individuals who needed help and they helped. The peace treaties were signed 5 years ago, Zekthara said. Today, former HFY worlds are some of the most prosperous in the galaxy. They trade freely with coalition planets. Their children attend human universities. Some of their best engineers work on human projects. The young officer shook his head in amazement. How did humans forgive so completely? I think they never learned how to hate properly, Zekthara replied. Other species can hate for generations. We remember wrongs done to our ancestors and pass that anger to our children. But humans seem to forget hate as soon as the danger is over. The commander finished his drink and stood up to leave. The young officer had one more question. Do you think humans are the strongest species in the galaxy? Zekthara paused at the door. He thought about all the stories he had told, all the battles he had witnessed, all the sacrifices he had seen. No, he said finally. Humans are not the strongest. The Velkari are stronger. They are not the fastest. The Zentari are faster. They are not the smartest. The Thorax are smarter. Then why did they win the war? Zekthara looked out at the peaceful space station, where different species worked and lived together without fear. Human families walked past HFY merchants. Velkari children played with Zentari friends, because they understood something the rest of us never learned, he said. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is something you build, something you choose, something you fight for every day. He paused at the door. Humans did not win because they were the best at destroying their enemies. They won because they were the best at making their enemies into friends. As Zekthara walked away, the young officer sat alone with his thoughts. He looked around the cantina and realized that half the customers were species that had once fought against each other. Now they shared drinks and stories like old friends. The human way of war had been terrible to witness, but the human way of peace was perhaps even more powerful. Outside the cantina, a memorial wall displayed the names of all who had died in the war. Millions of names from dozens of species. carved in stone that would last forever. At the bottom of the wall, in simple letters, was a message in every galactic language. They died so that we could choose to live in peace. The young officer read the words and finally understood what Commander Zekthara had been trying to tell him. The most frightening thing about humans was not their willingness to die for what they believed in. It was their willingness to live for it.